No. 1 hour and I'm out. 1 hour. No. Oh, with Trump? He's holding the money back?
450 million. 500, 10 million, 510 million. And Danny's on the joint committee that wrote a letter.
Well, they better get that money because their investments aren't doing very good. All right, here we go. Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos, here we go. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא בריאה גפן Amen. L'chaim. Okay. Blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei. Amen. Okay, welcome to Leviticus. We, if you remember, we finished Exodus last week. Torah portion this week is called Vayikra, which is the very beginning of the third book of the Torah, the book of Leviticus. And so now we move into the introduction, officially, of the sacrificial cult and the variety of different type of sacrifices that can be offered. Now, one of the things that we normally do when we read through Leviticus is you start to say, you know, the first book was amazing. And the second book was a story like you wouldn't believe. And I can't wait to see what's in the third book. And it's not as good. You know, it's not as fun. Unless you come to this class. Then all of a sudden, all right. Now, I want to ask you, before we get into it, there are a variety of different types of sacrifices. If you know the types of the different sacrifices, it makes Leviticus a little bit more interesting. Because if you know why each sacrifice is brought, and you know how it's brought, and you know what the implications for the way it's done, what they stand for, then you can learn interesting things, and then it's fun and worthwhile. Otherwise, you're sitting around talking about blood and barbecue and fats and limbs, and it's and you may not realize this anymore, but one of the reasons why it's not so interesting is because we don't do these sacrifices anymore. By the way, I was explaining in my class at University of Miami this week, Chabad, they have a custom of reading 3 chapters a day of the Mishnah Torah. The Mishnah Torah is the summary of the Talmud by Maimonides in the 12th century. But the law code that everyone really in the entire world holds by when you try to figure out Jewish law is not the Mishnah Torah by Maimonides, but rather the Shulchan Aruch by Joseph Caro, which was written in Sfat in the 16th century. And so the question is to Chabad, why do you read 3 chapters a day of Maimonides, which is not the ultimate law today? Why don't you read 3 chapters of Joseph Caro of Shulchan Aruch, which is the ultimate law today? And what's the answer? The answer is because Joseph Caro only dealt in the Shulchan Aruch with laws that exist today, which means that he doesn't cover laws that don't exist today, meaning all the sacrificial stuff and a lot of the agricultural stuff that no longer exists because the temple's been destroyed. So why does Chabad believe that you need to study Mishnah Torah instead? Because when the Mashiach comes, you ever heard of that? Mashiach. Yeah, they seem to think it's coming. I hope they're right. I went to a Chabad school growing up. All of the teachers had bumper stickers that said, "Hang in there, Mashiach is coming." I've been hanging in there since pre-nursery. I'm still hanging in there. But they need to know, because if the Mashiach comes and the temple comes back, we're going to need to be able to do these sacrifices. So that's why they studied Mishnah Torah, because they're preparing for the next world also. So my question is this, a lot of people always say things like, wow, I didn't know Jews believed in heaven. I guess because there are some Reformed conceptions, in Pittsburgh in the 1860s, that when they came up with the Pittsburgh platform, that we don't really believe in that so much. And we actually took a lot of those references out of our prayer book. They were excised. So, okay, fine. So if you want to say, but the truth is, and this is usually my answer for Jews believe in heaven, that not only do we believe in it, we invented it. Who do you think came up with okay, so maybe other people had conceptions of afterlife, but the idea of you're being judged and you go to heaven and everyone gets to go, not just the pharaohs and not just the courtier, we invented this idea. It's in the very beginning of Genesis, right? The light? Yeah, so on day 4, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. But on day 1, he created light. Well, so if day 1 is light is created, but there's no sun, moon, and stars, and there's no Edison, where did that light come from? And the answer is that light was heaven. Right? That's how the Torah begins. Reshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right? Created the heavens. We invented it.
For some reason your sacred
I might.
today is coming up.
You know why? Because Mindy was sick on Friday. And, yeah, but I do bring copies. So if you're at home, I'm sorry, we didn't get a chance to put it online, but we'll try to by the end of whenever Mindy's feeling better. For Shleima. Sorry about that. I totally forgot. There are, for anyone who didn't get, there should be plenty. Okay, so that light that God created on day 1, that was the heavens. Now the question is, are our goals different for what we want to experience in this world and what we want to experience in heaven? Does anyone happen to know what it says on page 17 in the Talmud, in the tractate of Brachot, about going to heaven? Any of you cover that this week? No, I mean, just, all right. So in Brachot, in the tractate of Brachot on page 17, there is a description of what heaven is like. Okay? And, it's not a bodily experience, right? Your body doesn't go to heaven. Only your soul goes to heaven. So the Talmud explains that anything that your body does or need doesn't happen in heaven, right? So what does that mean? There's no eating. There's no drinking. I mean, you thought you're going to go to heaven, and it's just going to be like Joe's Buffet, and it's kosher now, and it's endless key lime pie, and I don't have that, that stomach issue anymore. Right? That's not what it is. It's not. Sorry. Right. Now, some of you now want to convert and say, what do you think I come to these classes for? I'm building up for, okay. Sorry. There's no using the restroom. There's no sexual relations. There's no getting sick. There's no not feeling well. There's no anxiety. There's nothing human.
All you have is the couch.
So what do you do all day? So we don't really know what you do all day. We only know what you don't do. Because anything bodily you don't do. So the only thing it does say is you sit in the radiance of God. And that is supposed to be fun. And they say that one moment of that is greater than any feeling you could have in this world a zillion times more. That's supposed to be pretty good. But if you think about it, if you could achieve a moment of pure bliss in this world, and maybe you have once or twice, I don't know, Grateful Dead concert or whatever, but the Phillies win the the Eagles blow out the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. You have once in a while, you have this moment of pure bliss. But even when the game's over on Sunday night, your back still hurts. You still have to go to work on Monday. Stock market's doing great last few days. Whatever it is, there's something to bother you. Like a lot of people like getting massages. But about a third of the way through the massage, all you think about is it's going to end soon. And then my back's still going to hurt. I still got to go back to work. The stock, all your whatever moment of joy you achieve in this world, it's fleeting. Because whatever your problems are after that moment of joy, you're still going to be there. Right? And heaven is that feeling of bliss that never ends. Right? That you're just constantly, you're in the right place at the right time and everything's perfect with no worries. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good. The question is, how do you strive for that? Now, in heaven you can get that. In this world maybe you can't, but you can still strive for it. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Why do I bring it up now? Because there are a variety of different types of sacrifices. There's the sacrifices you do for sins. There's the daily sacrifice you do, which we now have instead of those prayer. There's holiday sacrifices. There's guilt sacrifices. But there's another sacrifice in chapter 3 of Leviticus called shlamim. Have any of you ever heard of this one before? Shlamim. Shlamim is generally translated as a peace offering. All right. Shlamim from the word shalom. Now, does anyone know how to say in Hebrew the word for payment? You made a payment. Very good. Oh, Israeli. Okay. Tashlum. Now, do you hear shalom in tashlum? Right? What does peace and payment have to do with anything? Once you've paid it,
Peace of mind.
you're good. You're at peace. You're paid off. In Hebrew, the word for payment, in modern Hebrew, the word for payment comes from the same root as to be at peace. Shalom. Right? Now, also the word for wholeness in Hebrew is shalem, to be whole. To be whole, whatever that means, comes from the same root as to be at peace. And there's a sacrifice called the shlamim. So if I told you, you bring a sin offering after you sin, no kidding. You bring a holiday sacrifice when it's a holiday, no kidding. You bring a peace offering, when? How do you know when to bring a peace offering? Okay, so that's an introduction. Chapter 3, verse 1. Okay? Everyone have Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1? Okay, Norman, get us going. Here we go.
If your offering is a sacrifice of well-being, if you offer of the herd, whether a male or a female, you shall bring before the Eternal One without blemish. You shall lay a hand upon the head of your offering and slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall dash the blood against all sides of the altar. Then present from the sacrifice of well-being as an offering by fire to the Eternal the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is about the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, that is at the loins, and the protuberance on the liver, which you shall remove with the kidneys. Aaron's sons shall turn these into smoke on the altar, with the burnt offering which is upon the wood that is on the fire, as an offering by fire, of pleasing odor to the Eternal. And if your offering for a sacrifice of well-being to the Eternal is from the flock, whether a male or a female, you shall offer one without blemish. If you present a sheep as your offering, you shall bring it before the Eternal, and lay a hand upon the head of your offering. It shall be slaughtered before the tent of meeting, and Aaron's son shall dash its blood against all sides of the altar.
Okay, so. Always better to just let me talk. Okay, or not. Yes. Please. Okay, so very good question. So, the question is there any significance to laying the hands on the head of the animal? So, when you lay the hand on the head, that's called smicha. All right, it's the same thing as what you do when you become a rabbi. Another rabbi puts their hands on your head and you're given smicha. Smicha means that in some way something's happening with the sin. It's something that the animal has to be, the transference of the sin onto the animal, and then when the animal is sacrificed, that's the sacrifice, the sin offering is forgiven. So one of the things we saw here is, in addition to the shlamim, there was also the olah. The olah is the burnt offering or the elevation offering that is offered for the case of a sin. But you could offer different sacrifices together, and that's one of the things that we just saw here.
The smoke goes up.
Yeah, well, smoke always goes up, but with the olah, the entire animal is offered to God. One of the things you see here, and why it's interesting, is because, you might say, who cares which of the limbs are offered and so forth, but when they say different limbs are offered, what they're saying is, yeah, but who do they go to? So if it's an olah, which is what is covered in chapter 1 of Leviticus, I think we did that last year at this time. We talked all about the olah. The elevation offering goes all to God. There's nothing left for anyone to eat because the entire thing is burnt. However, with the shlamim, different parts are, as we just saw, different parts are offered and different parts are not offered, which means that not everything's burnt completely, and the people who brought the sacrifice get some of it back for the purpose of eating it. And then they're required to eat it. And also, part went to the Kohanim. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. I don't want to get into that yet, but you'll see I'll explain that later. The first thing I want to explain, though, is we're learning now about the shlamim, which is sounds like the name of, like from Laverne and Shirley. Right. It's not that. That's something else. But the shlamim, we're learning about what it is now. However, if you wanted to figure out the, what's the word? the context. If you want to, such a hard word. If you want to figure out the context of why you would offer a shlamim, what could you do? Look throughout the Torah and look through the different narratives and see when someone offered a shlamim. Right, so I could go back now to Genesis or Exodus or even to Deuteronomy and see people offering a shlamim and then try to figure out, well, what's going on in their life at that time that caused them to bring it? And then that informs why you would have it. Does that make sense? So I want to show you 3 cases. So we're going to have to jump around a little bit. It's going to be a little bit annoying, but it's important to see this. You can't study the Torah in isolation, right? If you ever go to Rashi's house, right, you would see 8 or 9 books open at the same time, right? I remember one time when I was in rabbinic school, and yes.
Sorry, can I have a question? Did you say that at the time of Abraham, sacrifices were being made?
Sure, of course.
But they weren't being made in the same context that we're learning now because this is later, right? I mean, this is after Abraham.
Yes, but Abraham was a prophet, so he would have known how to do it. So, for example, remember when he takes up Isaac, he's going to sacrifice Isaac. God says, no, don't do that. Sacrifice a ram instead. Sacrifice the ram. But he still had to do it according to the kosher way of sacrificing the ram and pour out the blood. Well, how would he have known how to do that? Because he was a prophet. But as you go through, you see a variety of different cases in Genesis where they're offering sacrifices. Because before the Holy Temple was built, you were allowed to offer sacrifice wherever you wanted. Look at Cain and Abel. The reason that Cain kills Abel is because God accepts Abel's sacrifice, but not Cain's. What did they bring? Sacrifices. Noah brings sacrifices after the ark. They're all over the place. We don't think about it a lot, but...
Did other cultures at that time
Sure.
also make...
Sure, yeah. But in different ways. And with non-kosher animals. Use the mic.
But after the Akedah, God told us we don't sacrifice human beings anymore.
Right, and we don't.
And I recall that throughout the Torah, that every time there was an event, whether a blessing for something good that happened, there was a monument that was left. There was a pile of stones to mark the spot where Abraham made a sacrifice.
I'm going to show you an example of one of those. Yeah.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, okay. So if you look with me now at Genesis 46:1. It's kind of towards the end of Genesis. What is it? 288 in Plout. Okay. Do you have it? Anyone? Judy? Okay. Genesis 46, verse 1.
So Israel set out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God called to Israel in a vision by night, "Jacob, Jacob." He answered, "Here." And he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there into a great nation. Myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also bring you back, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes."
So if you caught that, Jacob offers a sacrifice in verse 1, which is a shlamim. Now, it's called zvachim. It's not called shlamim yet. But the offering that he does offer is a shlamim. Now, we're going to see 2 more examples in the Torah where the word shlamim is actually used. But in verse 1, you can take my word for it, this is a shlamim. He's offering a shlamim. What's the context? What's the good thing that's happening? What's about to happen that's good? He's going to be reunified with Joseph. So, for all this time that he thought Joseph was dead, he wasn't whole. But now that he's going to find Joseph, there's a sense of shalem, a sense of wholeness. So example number one. Okay, so the first example in the Torah of someone offering a shlamim is Jacob, because something was wrong. Joseph wasn't in his life. And now he's becoming whole again. I don't know why I'm getting this feedback, but it's... Okay, so now let's go to the second example. It's Exodus 24, verse 3. Exodus 24, verse 3. Everyone have it? Anyone have it? 590. Okay, Judy or Ken, either one. I'm sorry, can you read verses 3 through 8 of chapter 24 of Exodus?
Yeah.
And
Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of the Lord and all of the rules. And all the people answered with one voice, saying, "All the things that the Lord has commanded we will do." And Moses then wrote down all the commands of the Lord. Early in the morning he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay, this is what you're saying. Yeah. Here's an example that he set up 12 pillars.
He designated some young men among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to the Lord.
Okay, did you catch that? Sacrifices of well-being. The Hebrew there is vayizbechu zvachim shlamim. So this is an example of shlamim, the type of peace offering that we learn about in Leviticus chapter 3. This is an example of it. That Moses, before we learned about it, now in Leviticus chapter 3, back there in Exodus in chapter 23, Moses already offered one. This is it. It literally says the word right here at the end of verse 5, 3, 4, 5, shlamim. You have the word shlamim. Okay? All right, so let's keep going.
Look at this. If you go on reading there, there's still what Moses does with the blood, and he's dashing it on the...
Yeah, let's keep going.
Oh, okay.
Let's keep going. Through verse 8.
All right. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in basins, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. Then he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people. And they said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will faithfully do." Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, "This is the blood of the covenant which the Lord now makes with you concerning all these commands."
Right, the last two words of verse 7 in Hebrew are two of the most famous words in the Torah. Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do it and we'll listen to it. But this little section we just read is called the Dam HaBrit. The Brit, the covenant of blood. What's the covenant of blood? The Jewish people just accepted the Torah. So before this section, the Jewish people did not have the Torah. After this section, they made a covenant with the blood. They've now accepted the Torah. So before the Shlamim, they were without the Torah. Now they have the Shlamim and they are with the Torah. So you could say the Jews without the Torah were not whole. But now that we have the Torah, we are whole. So we've seen two examples. Jacob without Joseph, but then reuniting with Joseph, he offers a Shlamim. Jewish people without the Torah, but then get the Torah, they offer a Shlamim. Wholeness. Shlamim.
Rabbi, is this the only place where the blood is sprinkled on the people as well?
No. There are other examples where you put blood on your thumbs and on your big toes, and there are a couple other examples. But there's always a reason. The reason's not always the same. I was just covering that with a bar mitzvah student, why the thumbs and the toes, but it's not in this triennial cycle, so I can't comment on it. Okay, one more example. Deuteronomy 27, verse 1. I know it's annoying to skip around like this, but if you don't see these examples, you miss the whole point. So Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 1. And then we'll go back to our Torah portion, Leviticus, and see what's really happening. Anyone have the page? 15:15. Right. Deuteronomy 27:1. Okay, Ken, you have it? Okay.
Moses, what's that? Oh, what am I doing?
Commanded?
Moses and the elders of Israel charged the people, saying, "Observe all the instruction that I enjoin upon you this day. As soon as you have crossed the Jordan into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall set up large stones, coat them with plaster, and inscribe upon them all the words of the teaching. When you cross over to invade the land that the Lord your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord God of your fathers promised you. Upon crossing the Jordan, you shall set up these stones about which I charge you this day on Mount Ebal, and coat them with plaster. There too you shall build an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones. Do not wield an iron tool over them. You must build the altar of the Lord your God of unknown stones. You shall offer on it burnt offerings to the Lord your God, and you shall sacrifice their offerings of well-being and eat them, rejoicing before the Lord your God. And on those stones you shall inscribe every word of this teaching most distinctly." Moses and the Levitical priests spoke to all Israel, saying, "Silence, hear, O Israel. Today you have become the people of the Lord your God. Heed the Lord your God, and observe his commandments and his laws, which I enjoin upon you this day." Thereupon Moses charged the people, saying, "After you have crossed the Jordan, the following shall stand on Mount Gerizim when the blessing for the people is spoken. Shimon, Levi,
I think I lost you. What verse are you on? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Verse 7 is Shlamim.
Yeah, I lost you because I'm reading it in Hebrew. Could you just go back to verse 7?
Verse 7.
Yeah.
Verse 7. And you shall sacrifice their offerings of well-being.
Okay, and that's it. That's I missed it. The whole part I was waiting for. But verse 7 says, "And you shall offer sacrifices of well-being," and it says there, "You shall offer the shlamim." Well, why? Because what's about to happen? The Jewish people are about to go into the land of Israel. So, the first one was Jacob was not whole until he was reunited with Joseph. The second one is the Jewish people were not whole until they had the Torah. And the third one is the Jewish people are not whole until they go into the land of Israel. And in all three of those instances, you offer a shlamim. So what I'm pointing out is that the different times that shlamim are offered in the Torah always come at a time of wholeness or peace. Okay? That's why we offer a shlamim. Okay, now that we understand that, if you have the sheet that I passed out, I have a variety of different rabbis talking about what does it mean, shlamim? What does verse 3:1 actually mean? So the first one is the Rashbam, who was the grandson of Rashi. Okay, and here's what he says about this verse. Annabelle, would you mind reading the Rashbam?
The owner had said, "I'm obligating myself to offer a peace offering, shlamim." Seeing that the donor had not added the word olah to describe the offering he meant to sacrifice, it is not assumed that he had intended for the entire sacrificial animal to be burned upon the altar. as is the case with an olah. The expression shlamim, which is related to shalem, to pay, is an expression used by David, who said that he wanted to pay his vows. It is assumed that the vows were undertakings to offer sacrificial animals. Our sages in Torah Kohanim, speaking of nedava, understand the word shalom as an offering in which everyone shares, i.e., the fat parts are burned on the altar belong to God. The chest and thigh belong to the priests, and the balance may be eaten by the owner, the donor.
Okay, so one of the things we said, the first example of shlamim in the Torah was when Joseph was reunited with Jacob. But what that's really saying is all the tribes were reunited. What it's really saying is the Jews were together. There was unity. So what happens with the shlamim is that not the same thing happens to the meat of all of the sacrifices. With the shlamim, one of the things that's unique about the shlamim is some of the meat goes to the Kohanim, and some of the meat goes to the Baalim, meaning the owners, the people who brought the animal. And what's happening is this is the one sacrifice where the priests and the owners who brought the meat sit and eat together, which represents amongst the Jewish people unity, right? They're sitting and eating together. Okay, so that's the first property of the idea of the shlamim is that it represents unity amongst the Jewish people. And why does it? What signifies that? That the priests and the people who brought the sacrifice eat it together, because there are a lot of times where either nobody eats it, or the priests eat it on their own, or the owners eat it on their own. But this is the only time where they eat it together. Okay. Now, what does that do? Yeah, okay. So let's now look at a midrash on that, the second source on the sheet. Sifra is one of the ancient midrashim on the Torah, on the book of Leviticus. It's called Sifra. There's another one called Sifrei, which is ancient midrash on Deuteronomy. But this is the one on Leviticus. Okay, who else? Shelley?
Sifra, and if a peace offering is offered, Rabbi Yehuda says, whoever brings peace to the world. Another word for peace is peace, in which all things are peace, the blood and the rams for the altar, the breast and the thigh for the priests, the skin and the flesh for the owners. Rabbi Shimon says, he who is peace brings peace, and he who does not mourn brings peace. I have nothing but peace that is of joy.
Okay. So look what's really interesting here is, in order to bring a shlamim, not anyone can bring one. So you might say, something great happened. I want to bring a shlamim, right? Maybe your daughter gets married, it's your birthday, you win the lottery, or something you're excited about. But you have to be at peace to bring the peace. And what Rabbi Shimon adds is, well, who's never at peace? Someone in mourning. So one of the things I could tell you is, look what the last thing Rabbi Shimon says is, I have nothing but peace that is of joy. So if I go to bring the shlamim and I say to God, I'm here to, or I say to the priest at the altar, when I get to the holy temple or to the tabernacle in the wilderness, I'm here to bring the shlamim. And they say to you, you have sciatica? A little bit. You're out. You got to be feeling great. You have any trouble at work? Yeah, I make a living, but you're out. If everything's not the way it's supposed to be, if you're not at total peace, you can't offer a shlamim.
What if they lie?
It didn't happen. It didn't happen because first of all, you're doing it in public. You're doing it openly. And so if you're going to, if you had a bad business dealer and you go to the priest and say, everything's great in my life, and someone says, what are you talking about? I know you just lost a lot of money. That's very embarrassing, and now you're going to be punished. And the punishment could be severe. And people, in ancient times, it was a lot different. People believed in this stuff. Right? People believed there was no reform. There was none of that. You do it or you die. Right? You do this the right way or you get zapped. Or your crops don't grow. Or something terrible is going to happen to you. There was a lot more of a superstition than there is today. People be very nervous. So I mean, look, was there ever a time where someone lied to the priests? Probably. But I wouldn't have been so excited for that person's future. But it's a much different way of thinking than we have now.
Or the priest lied to us.
Yeah, now we lie all the time. Who cares? Right? People
Nobody
lie.
ever lies to the rabbi.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe not to me. But yes.
Because feeling at peace is something very subjective.
No,
So,
right.
you can have all the pain in the world, which is a body experience, going to what you were saying about being human or God, and still feel at peace. And would the priest consider whether that person is allowed to do the peace offering because it's at peace, or it comes from you as a self-expression?
I don't know. I mean, it's the same answer. I
Okay.
mean, look, someone could lie. It's true.
No, I'm not saying lying. I'm just saying that it's a subjective perception.
Well,
so-
right. So, look, I imagine the priest would have some input, right? So you bring your animal, and you say, I'm very excited. My daughter's getting married. Right? It's a wonderful thing. I feel great. So they probably would question you and say, yeah, but is everything really great? Anybody in your family die recently? Are you in the period of Shloshim? Are you saying Kaddish? Have you paid your bill at the shul? I don't know. I'm sure they would question you. One of the things you see in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, which I brought with me to jury duty this week. Probably the first one who's ever done that. The irony to me was just beyond belief, because that's actually the tractate that I'm studying now. So, in Sanhedrin and in the Torah, there's this thing called zomamim, or hazama. Hazama means that you're dishonest in front of the court. And so they had all kinds of what they called chakirot, all kinds of ways of questioning you to make sure that you were telling the truth. And if you lied, you could get the death penalty. Because lying in court is one of the 10 commandments. It's number 9, right? Age shaker, not giving false testimony. It's one of the 10 commandments. So if you lied in front of the priest, you could actually get the death penalty. So if you're going to say this in public, and you could get it's one thing to just lie to each other here. You go into a court of law and start lying, you bring in a whole different types of consequences. And this is, this is the Supreme Court in front of the. So I think people were probably pretty careful. Did anyone ever lie and get away with it in the ancient times? Yeah, probably. I don't know. Okay. Clear so far? Okay, so let's go now to the Bechor Shor. The Bechor Shor was from Mainz, which is, I believe, Germany today. He was from the 1100s. Just as a couple of little notes here. So he said to the owners, right? Lebaalim in Hebrew, to the ones. The owner means the one who brings the sacrifice and hands it over to the priests. The rest of that should be meat. Sorry, not the rest of the meat. The rest of the meat. This is the way of peace that everyone ate together. Okay, so we already sort of covered that. But the idea of shlamim is that there's a unity that's represented by the owners eating with the priests. And then the Bechor Shor also says on Exodus 29, it appears that they ate together and that this is the way of peace, for it brings people together. Actually, there was one more comment. I didn't bring the whole thing, I guess. Or you know what? Maybe it's the Ralbag who adds to that. So let's look at the Ralbag now, another medieval rabbi. John, would you mind reading that? At the bottom of the page, and if.
And if a shlamim offering is his offering, after explaining the law of the mincha, it comes to explain the law of performing the shlamim offering, and it is called shlamim, derived from the shalom, peace, meaning that it will come after there is peace between the person and God. And it is for this reason that the owners, the priests, and God all eat from it together at the same table.
Okay, and that's the main point. You see what he just added? The Bechor Shor says the priests and the owners eat it, but the Ralbag comes in and says when the priests and the people get together, then God joins. You see that? And God all eat from it together at the same table. Okay, and that's really the only point of the Ralbag that I wanted to bring. Last one, the Regio. The Regio, look, he went into Torah, it didn't work out so well, did very well with Parmesan cheese. Did a lot better with his cheese products. No, but there was an Italian rabbi in the 19th century, in the 1800s, known as the Regio. He was known for his scientific way of looking at the Torah, even from an Orthodox perspective. And this is what he wrote on the verse. Joe, would you mind? Last source, and then we'll try to explain what's going on here.
And if the sacrifice of peace offerings is offered, he first offered a burnt offering and a grain offering, which are most holy of holies. Now he speaks of peace offerings, which are less holy offerings. And the word peace offerings is from the word peace, although they are two different meanings, because peace in the eyes of God is success, and the sacrifice of peace offering is from great joy. Sometimes the blessings of God and all that he has, or when great goodness has come. And the sacrifice of peace offerings is to give thanks to God for his grace and to tell of his goodness, and to the people who have escaped from trouble, and to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving to God for having been merciful to him, as in the Parsha of the commandment. And by thanking his God and recognizing his goodness, he draws upon himself the grace of the Most High, and the Lord will preserve him, and all that he has will be in peace.
Okay, so this is very interesting, but there's one line here that is the point, and the reason why I wanted to look at this particular commentary. If you look at the second line, just want to review that second sentence, because that's the essence of it. Now he speaks of peace offerings, which are less holy offerings, and the word offerings is from the word shalom, right? Although they are two different meanings. In other words, shlamim means wholeness, and shalom means peace. So we're saying, well, isn't wholeness and peace? They're similar, but they're different. But here it is. This is the answer. Because peace in the eyes of God is success. You can only, so what the Regio's point of view is, you bring the shlamim when you've had success. Now, good question is, what's success? So he gives a few examples. So if you want to know what success is, he says here, and the sacrifice of peace, to give thanks to God for his grace, to tell of his goodness. And here's one example. To people who've escaped from trouble. Right? You were sick, but you got better. You were in jail, but you got released. You were at a battlefield, but you survived. Someone tried to kill you, but they didn't. You've had success with something. Right? Okay, or to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving for God having been merciful to him, right? Which could be a lot of different things. So Here's what I think all of this means. We could have looked at a variety of different types of sacrifices, and I think the other sacrifices are a lot easier to explain. Why do you bring a sin offering? Because you sinned, and you need to get back to equilibrium. Right? And you need to bring the world back into equilibrium because your sin threw the world off its rails. And now by doing that sin offering, you've put it back. Everything's back in order. Fine. Or it's a holiday, and the Torah specifically commands. We're about to do it, right? We have to bring the Paschal offering on Passover. So you bring the Paschal offering, and everyone understands that there's a mitzvah, you have to do it. There's the Korban Tamid. Every single day, morning, noon, and night, the priest had to bring a sacrifice on behalf of all of the people. We can't do that anymore, so we have Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv. You know the thing we're about to do after you leave? That thing's called Shachrit. Didn't catch it. All right. But then there's this Shlamim, which is 100% voluntary. You could go your whole life and never bring one. No one's commanding you to do it. So why would you do it? Because you've achieved, at any given moment in your life, a taste of the afterlife. For one moment, you've caught a glimpse of the afterlife. And what's the afterlife, as is explained in Brachot? To sit in the radiance of God and to be with God. And for a given moment there, everything was perfect. And I'll give you 3 examples. Jacob finds out that Joseph's still alive and he's going to see him. The Jewish people get the Torah. The Jewish people get the land of Israel. Those are 3 examples of perfection. Now, has everything been so smooth with the land of Israel ever since? No. If some of you were if you heard Alec last night or 2 nights ago at University of Miami Hillel, they had the comedian Alex Edelman, and he was saying something like, someone's saying, anti-Semitism today is unprecedented levels. And he said, unprecedented? It's the most precedented thing that's ever happened. You want to look for precedents of when this is so not everything with the Torah and the Jewish people and the unification of the Jewish people has been so wonderful. But there are moments in this world where everything goes right, and for a moment, you catch a glimpse of what it's really like to be with God. And when you catch that moment, you have to mark it. And the way that you mark it is with a peace offering called Shlamim, where everything's whole and perfect. I'll give you one example of how I learned this moment, and I've been trying to teach it to grooms at weddings my whole career, because it happened to me. So now, and I'll tell you how I learned about it and what I think it means. Because when you sit in, as the Talmud explains, you sit and dwell in God's presence. Now, God's presence is called Shekhinah. Right, you've heard that word before? Shekhinah, it's a female word, it's a Kabbalistic word, but it means God's divine presence, and you sit and dwell with the Shekhinah. So how do you feel the Shekhinah in this world? So I felt it, I think, a couple times. 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. But one for sure, the time in my life when I learned what it meant to feel it, I learned it from a rabbi in Cincinnati. And maybe when I explain it to you, you'll be able to say, yeah, I've had that feeling too. You might say, maybe not, and then you would have saved some money because you never had to bring a shlamim. Yeah. But what is the bringing of a shlamim today? You ever wake up and say, boy, I really should make a donation to the temple. Just that stuff. All right. Doesn't happen that often. So when I got married, August 11th, 2001, it was in the summer, about to start my 5th year of rabbinic school. So who were my most influential people, you're right, my professors. And one of my particular professors for one class was also the rabbi at a large Reform synagogue in Cincinnati called Rockdale Temple. And I immediately loved him from the class that I had with him. He wasn't a professor, he was a full-time rabbi, but he taught one class. So I had this class with him. And when I met Jody, and she was not Jewish, and she's, well, you need to be, if this is, and she was already interested in conversion even before I met her, which is a whole different story. But I said, you got to meet this guy, Rabbi Goldman. So she went to meet with him, and he was the one who was going to convert her. So she went through a conversion process with him. A few years later, he married us. So before the wedding, or as we're about to march into the sanctuary, we're in like the lobby and they're going to march in, I couldn't stop crying. I just had like all these like 10 different emotions clashed at once. And I like just crying. And my dad was there. My dad said, "What the hell is wrong with you? Get a hold of you." What do you? So, okay. Very moving moment. So afterwards, I remember sitting, before we went into the reception, which is also in the temple, I was sitting with the rabbi who married us, like on like a radiator in the hall. We're just sitting there. And I was explaining to him how I felt before we walked in. And right as I was explaining that to him, two of my professors from rabbinic school who I'd invited to the wedding walked by. And one of them, who was a real mentor to me, a guy named Sam Joseph, he said, "What are you guys talking about?" And before the rabbi had even had a chance to say to me, or to respond to what I was telling him, the rabbi looked at my professor and said that I was just explaining to him how I had been touched by the Shekhinah. And all of a sudden, in that moment, I realized that that feeling that I had that was so overwhelming to me was that one moment of bliss of what it's like to be in heaven. And so now I know when I get up there, I'm going to say, I remember this. I only had it for a second. I'm ready for the full thing now. But to me, that's what it is. So there are moments, if we're lucky, where something so wonderful happens that you really feel like you're touched by God. And you're not allowed to go past one of those moments without marking it and letting God know that you recognized it. And all of that is why we have chapter 3 of Leviticus. It's not all about sin and slaughtering it. It's about, God, I understand what. So Jacob said, I thought Joseph was dead. He's alive? Imagine how he felt. The Jewish people accepted the Torah from God. Imagine how that felt. Jewish people walked into the land of Israel for the first time after all this wandering. Imagine how that felt. I got to marry my wife. Imagine how that felt. That's a peace offering, and that's what heaven's like. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
You won't see me.
It's very awkward because you have to put your ducks if you're going to donate to the ALS Foundation. Donna's the one who gets the check. Bring the check to Oh my God. Oh, is that what you're doing? And you make it out
My bad.
We have too much to do. I said.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.